It is episode 195 of the Metal Roundtable. I am Metal Rob, and with me, as always, is the great that guy right there. Whoop, there he is.
Carcass John.
And also that dude right there.
Scott, that's me.
Scott,
Nothing
Raging
fancy
Waters.
today,
Nothing fancy. Scott, no life till Metal Waters.
but today, kids, for a very specific reason, we have this dude. Harmless
Yeah,
Rebel
but-
is with us. That's right. So let's get first things first. You can follow me on Instagram at Metal Rob's Records, where I will wear you down with stuff in my shop. You can follow Scott Waters on Instagram at hang on, No Life Till Metal. You can follow the Carcass on Instagram at Carcass John Art. You can also find Scott just by simply Googling or searching Scott Waters on YouTube, or also searching No Life Till Metal. He has a badass channel. The Carcass can serve you up a nice logo and a nice t-shirt design, and he will happily do so at a fair price.
At a fair price.
Where can they follow you, my brother?
Harmless Rebel on YouTube.
There you go, Harmless Rebel on YouTube. So I need to address first things first here. If you're interested in anything AV media technology and you want to make that a career path, go to mediatech.edu, campuses in Dallas and Houston, and you can get under the tutelage of the great Kerry Crafton and others.
You did not just say tutelage.
You're damn right I did.
Okay.
And listen, there's another thing we need to address right off the bat. Two of you guys have unreadable logos. Now, one of them is cheating because it's our unreadable logo. So I know that one. But the other one, let me see what you got here.
Man, that's just one of those moments of genius. Oh, yeah, you'll never get it. They're from Florida.
Can you get closer a little bit?
Is it Worm something?
Oh, very close. Just the worm.
Huh.
Worm.
Oh, is
it's
that
Worm.
it?
Yep.
Oh,
Oh,
Okay.
nice.
good job, Steve.
Worm
Well,
something.
I saw the O and the M, and I just kind of put it together.
Yep. It's Worm from Florida. They're friends with Plos Modulated and Wharf Lurch. Kind of this psychedelic doom death, funeral, ambient, atmospheric death metal. You know,
Yeah,
new metal.
church music.
New metal.
Yeah,
You said new metal, so I wore a new metal shirt.
some gospel tunes. Yeah, you did. Well, I don't really have any shout outs, so I will take the easy way out. I just want to say thank you to all the labels that send me work. I have been so fortunate this year to do so many mastering jobs, and they keep the labels that Scott and I both work for. They keep us very busy. Rocks, Eonian, Resuscitation is a new label that I've picked up.
No
Over
Life
in
Till Metal.
Florida, Eric with Thrashback keeps me busy. Oh
Retroactive.
my gosh, Girder and Backbreaker, and also Retroactive and Brutal Planet. And Bombworks, and just so I'm just thankful. I've had a lot of work recently, and I really appreciate that. So that's my shout out to all the labels and indies bands that reach out to me for mastering work. Thank you for trusting me with your babies. Here's some fruit juice.
Well, I'll shout out Brad Amos at Deep Dallas Radio, and I'm grateful that I have a chance to put out some punishing music. If you ever want to just get your drive time on and start at 6 o'clock every Friday at on Deep Dallas Radio in the Crypt with Carcass John. And please send me, if you have any requests, you can send me a request to Carcass John Art. Just DM me there, and I will do my best to get it on the radio waves. But it's been kind of fun.
I forgot to shout out the Crypt. I'm sorry, dude.
That's okay. That's all right. And you'll hear lots of music that have logos like this.
Yes, you will.
Pile of sticks.
Scott, what you got?
Hey, I'd like to shout out a buddy of mine. His name is Greg the Egg, or Blackmore Rules on YouTube. Funny guy, really likes watching his channel, but he hooked me up with this badass Iron Kingdom shirt because he went to see them play recently. He got me a shirt and he got me their new CD, which is really good. Enjoying it. It's called The Blood of Creation. There it is.
What kind of metal is it?
Sorry.
Is it new?
Yes, brand new band. I think it's their third album, an EP. So yes, it's new, but NEW new.
Oh, NEW new. Okay, we're gonna have to clarify now. See,
Yes,
we have a
it's,
genre within a genre. It's just terrible.
I mean, in general, it's considered new wave of traditional heavy metal. But I also need to shout out Rob Caldwell, who sent me a box of 7-inch records like he did you last week, and you opened.
Ooh.
And here's, I thought I'd show him real quick. I already opened them, so but I'll
That's
go through
the
them real
only
quick.
way I
This
can
is
send you 7 inches, if you know what I'm saying.
is Holy Grail Seasons Bleedings. Holy
Yeah.
Grail, we're a California new wave traditional heavy metal band. This is their Christmas EP, which is cool. Got me some Metal Rob stickers. This
Oh,
is
yeah.
Tanith Citadel, who is a band that I don't know, but I'm looking forward to checking out.
Our buddy
player.
Rob Doom in Houston just did what do they call it? Like a review for KNAC.com
Tanith is
about
Doom, isn't
Tanith.
it?
Yeah, no, they're kind of traditional heavy metal, but with a little doomy edge. Yeah, they're great. They're good.
I feel like I've heard him before.
That's the
From
guitarist of it's one of the guitar players in Satan.
And he in they're from New York, right? The band is themselves.
No, they're from
The UK.
yeah, I think so.
Talk about one of the worst named bands, Satan, and nothing about their music is satanic, you know?
Oh, well,
It was just the thing in that new wave
Oh,
of
I
British
know.
heavy metal stuff, man. It was,
Right.
it was
Yeah.
yeah. I think I'm pretty sure that name really held them back. But
Oh, yeah.
anyhow,
definitely. They tried to
the
change
whole
it.
thing was recorded and mastered in New York. Anyhow, Mothership, which you guys have talked about many times.
Yep, local boys.
Yep,
I have Mothership
Overdose?
on the wall right there.
an Overdose.
Yep,
Those
I
are
got
killer.
Straight from the hand of the drummer, I think.
And then a couple more. Protest, A
Yep.
Pledge of Terror.
blistering
My buddy played bass in
thrash
that
from
band.
Dallas. Yep.
And then Satan.
Well, could it be
This is-
Satan?
The Doomsday Clock and Catacombs. And finally, Ganglion.
Man, I don't remember where I got that. I think it's a couple of dudes from Extol. I think. Our buddy Alex.
It's definitely from Norway. But I haven't looked it up yet. But everything on the back is from Norway. And then I was on vacation last week for several days, and when I got back, I had 40 boxes full of 7 inches. I keep wanting to say 45s because that's what I always called them. But the second box had
Oh, nice.
Oh, wow.
That's a
Heavy
good-
Metal Thunder and Speedy's Coming.
Is that a rock and
Scorpions.
roll box?
Los Escorpions.
No, it's just it's an eBay Japanese seller that I buy from all the time. I buy a lot of 7-inch singles from this guy because his shipping is cheap. It's like
that's why
$5.
I saw it on his website. Yeah, on his eBay. Yeah.
So,
yeah.
And I bought a bunch of 12-inch from him too, so he gave me a nice little discount. And I buy from him so often; he's been throwing in free stuff, which is nice. And that's it. That's my pile of 7 inches. Thank you very much, Rob.
Yep.
Appreciate that.
Steve, what about you?
I got to thank Scott because he sent me these like 4 months ago, and I totally forgot about them. I was digging through my inbox over there, and I had these stuffed in the back of another record. I totally forgot that he sent me these.
Nice.
2 new wave of British heavy metal classics.
Well, the funny thing about this is I've had the 7-inch for probably 10 years, and I've been looking for the jacket, and it never pops up. And the 7 inches, just the 7 inch is like $6, but with the jacket, it's like a $40 single, you know. And then, of course, the Mighty Diamond Head. So now, but you mentioned Extol. Rumor is they're doing shows again, so hopefully we get some new Extol music in the next year or so. It's been
Yeah,
a
their
long
last
time.
album was
Oh, man.
fantastic.
That was my album of the year that year it came out. So.
Yeah, it was great. I always tell people if Yes played death metal, that's what that album sounds like.
Yeah, if you like what's the band that Opeth, if you like Opeth, you'll really dig Extol. And talk about a band growing up in the line of fire. You know, they were playing shows and festivals in the late 90s with the black metal bands in Norway. You
Yep.
know, and they're a Christian band sharing the stage with those guys, you know, guys that were burning churches literally, and they're on the same stage and festivals with them.
They should have had a
That
show.
word, you know.
They should have had a show where Extol built a church on stage during their set, and then,
Euronymous burned it to the
They
ground.
burned it down. Oh man, that's hilarious.
See, I should have been in production and design or something. Yeah, that's a genius idea. So today, let's get into nu metal. What the hell is that? So
New
The
NU
reason-
metal.
NU metal, yes, the style. So the reason that we're going to talk about nu metal, two reasons. I had a couple people request it, and I had to go figure out what it was. But when the second or third person requested it, I had two in the last week. I was like, man, I'll just message the guys and see if they want to talk about it. Because I don't care if we talk about rap or country or whatever. And we all know what our opinions are going to be on those things, but it could make for a funny topic. Well, anyway, nu metal, maybe not that funny, but I had to go figure out what in the world it was, even because I literally have 3 CDs in my entire collection of nearly 4,000 that can be considered nu metal. So let me just give you a quick paragraph off of Wikipedia. Nu metal, it's a subgenre of alternative metal that combines elements of heavy metal music with elements of other music genres such as hip hop, alternative rock, funk, industrial, and grunge, is what Wikipedia says. Drawing elements and influences from a variety of musical styles, including multiple genres of heavy metal, blah, blah, blah. It rarely features guitar solos, heavily syncopated guitar riffs, 7-string guitars down-tuned, sometimes sampling, scratching, electronic backgrounds. Vocal styles include singing, rapping, screaming, and growling. Nu metal is one of the key genres of the new wave of American heavy metal, according to Wikipedia. And then I have a list of I thought there would be a list of 40 or 50 new wave bands, maybe. This list that I'm scrolling through has got several hundred bands on it, which...
Well, the thing with nu metal is there were very few key bands that really sold records. 90% of the nu metal bands, 1 or 2 songs, maybe. Most of them were one big song, and that was it. Maybe one album. I actually have a good friend who's in Seether now, who was in he was in like 5 different nu metal bands. And he talked about the way the labels would court these guys. They would put out one record and then they would dump them and look for the next nu metal band. They would do the same thing over and over again with a lot of these bands. And a lot of them were honestly just throwaway bands that the label knew they were going to get one hit out of. So they did the one hit, the one album, and then that was it with them. You know, there were very few actual bands that pumped out a number of albums. There were, there were a couple. You have Evanescence, who did like two popular albums,
Right.
But for the most, that was it.
What about, so my understanding of nu metal falls in line with Korn, Deftones, Lamb of God, and all those guys are pretty heavy hitters. I mean, they're still relevant.
Well, and also
is Rob Zombie nu metal? I mean, what is Rob
I don't
Zombie?
even know what you would call Rob Zombie, probably. So nu metal turned into a thing like grunge, where every band sounds completely different, but they don't have another category, so they just kind of lump them all together. But it started, even before Korn, it started with this band, LAPD. This was a funk metal band, And the key players in here are James Schaefer, who's Monkey from Korn, Fieldy, the bass player from Korn, and David Silveria, the drummer. And they really, those three guys created the nu metal sound. This is before that. This is straight funk metal. They got together with Jonathan Davis and Head and created Korn. And Korn, I mean, people don't realize, everybody talks about Slipknot being the big band. Korn was around almost a decade before. Korn was 93. The first Slipknot album was the end of 99. So there was a huge gap.
I have to tell you, too, I actually saw Korn in California in, I want to say 92, and it was Incubus. The rendition, not the rendition we know now, not the Louisiana version that changed their name to something else. Opprobrium. But this was Incubus when they were kind of the punkish Fungus Among Us and Korn, and opening for Anthrax. And it was, we were blown away by how weirdly wild Korn was. They were heavy. I mean, we had never heard anything quite as down-tuned and as heavy as that. But yeah, they were way before any of those others. Even Limp Bizkit, I guess, would you throw them into that mix too?
Korn got Deftones and Limp Bizkit signed, so they were later on. It was within a year or two, but and Korn really started not just the sound. They didn't just create the sound. A lot of the big bands were directly signed because Korn saw them and got them record deals. So that's how the Deftones got big. The Deftones' first few tours were backing up Korn. The same thing with Limp Bizkit. They got signed through, actually they may have got signed through Deftones. I can't remember, but it was all that. I mean, they did the Family Values tours, which were huge nu metal tours.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's really what spread early on.
So where does Burn the Priest / Lamb of God come into play?
Lamb of God came later, and a funny thing about Lamb of God is everybody swears they're not new. I think they're a mix of nu metal and metalcore. Everybody calls them thrash.
No, they're no.
It drives me nuts. And what kills me is I don't like Lamb of God, and I've seen them like 15 times because Megadeth likes to tour with them, Slayer likes to tour with them.
Because they draw people.
Oh, no, they do. They bring in a huge crowd. And their crowd is as ridiculous as the Slayer crowds are. They just go nuts. And I just saw them last week, 2 weeks ago. They opened for Pantera, So they opened for all these huge bands. But, I'm
not a fan either. I'm not a fan either. I've seen them like 3 times.
Yeah, they're a funny one because they kind of fit into a bunch of different categories and don't really fit in any of them,
Yeah,
but,
some of the ones that I knew, because I had to Google it to see what the hell was considered nu metal. I knew a few, like I knew Korn, Mudvayne, POD is thrown in there, Deftones, Linkin Park, Il Nino, Limp Bizkit. I knew those, and that all made sense to me. But then there were some like Disturbed. Okay, that made sense to me. Godsmack, stuff like that. Seven Dust, I guess, at least it's on this list. But I'm trying to think of the ones that I got into. And honestly, I never really connected with any of the nu metal stuff. And I think part of it for me was there was such a core element to it, which is, to your point, Steve, about Lamb of God. They're obviously great players. They're obviously good musicians. Tons of people love them. I've seen them live. They put on a great show opening for Slayer. But when I go try to listen to it, I can't do it. And I think the biggest thing for me is not the music, but the barking vocals.
Yeah.
However.
Okay, so that being said, so where do bands like Black Dahlia Murder and Motionless in White and bands like that, where do they fit?
Motionless in White was more on the core side. I've seen Black Dahlia Murder before. I don't really remember them though. And I never bought any of their records. I saw them open for Deftones in like 90.
Job for a Cowboy. There's another one that's kind of like Black 90s. Dahlia.
Yeah, Job for a Cowboy falls. I always considered them to be more of a death metal band.
Same.
But
yeah, so
The biggest ones by far are Korn and Slipknot. I mean, Korn, I just double checked because I wasn't sure. Korn has sold 60 million plus albums, and they're still putting out platinum albums. They're the only one of any of these bands that still puts out platinum albums. And Slipknot is just over 30 million. So, big numbers from those two bands. But and Korn's a funny one because Korn, so their first album, huge hit. It really changed music, whether you want to say that or not, and it brought in. So I was drumming for a band called Siege at the time, and me and the bass player both got really heavy into Korn because of their bass and drumming. That nobody played the funk bass the way Fieldy does in metal. And the drumming was kind of a mix of Sepultura and then some progressive, just off the wall drumming, jazz drumming. So we really got into it because of that. Then, like every record label does, they forced him into the studio and gave him a week to put out a record. And then they put out a shitty second record. But then they came back with their third and fourth that were, again, 4 or 5 times platinum. And unfortunately, they kind of fell off from there. I think what happened was, so the first few records, Jonathan Davis was dealing with personal issues, childhood abuse, stuff like that. And it was in the records, they were really dark. And then once he worked out those issues was the last one that I really liked. The record, all the music got kind of cheesy for me after that, and I stopped listening to him. And then unfortunately, about 5 years ago, Jonathan Davis's wife OD'd and died. His ex, they had split up, but she OD'd and ended up dying. And he started writing personal stuff again. And their last 2 records have been just as good as their early ones. So they're doing really well again. Then you got Slipknot, who again, their fans are like Slayer fans. I've seen Slipknot live. Dude, their fans go absolutely crazy. I mean, they'll rip places down. I mean, it's insane at a Slipknot show. I've never been a huge Slipknot fan. I've got their albums, but I remember when the first album came out, I didn't like it at all. I didn't understand it. They were trying to mix too many styles together at the same time, and they had the DJ, and their second album, they kind of pulled it together. And by their third album, I thought they were a really good band. That's when I really started to like them. But they were always kind of a weird one for me.
I just don't like Slipknot because they don't actually perform anymore. They're on. Well, no, let me take that back. They don't actually play. They're all backtracked, and I lost when I saw them on the last Mayhem tour. We had all access because that was a Turbid North side stage gig. And I went with them down there, and we had all access. And they, that was the first Gary Holt Slayer episodes, and we stood there and watched them just shred. But I just thought it was odd that Slipknot headlined, and they were towering over bands like Slayer and Motorhead and Anthrax. It seemed uncanny to me. It seemed like it should have been somehow flipped the other way around. But anyway, the long and the short is, I'm like you, Steve. I thought they were just very kind of uninteresting, but you keep mentioning these funk elements. And when I was very, very, very young, we had a bass player in our band that was trained at Berkeley and very oriented towards jazz and funk. And I actually liked the funk fusion thing, learned how to play drums that way. But what about bands like Suicidal Tendencies and Infectious Grooves, which I guess are one and the same? And I mean, are those
Infectious Grooves right there?
Yeah, right there. Well, I mean, are those considered new metal, or are those considered influences?
No, I mean that was kind of like this one. This is more funk metal. This isn't with the funk elements, or who else was funk metal? Mordred.
Like Mordred, 247 Spies. What about Living Color?
Living Color were their own thing. Living Color was another weird one. They weren't really metal. They were kind of their own thing. Same thing with King's X. King's X was kind of always their own thing. They had some funk elements to them. But with Korn, they added the hip hop element to it too. The bass is real interesting. With Fieldy's bass is I mean, he changed away bass players. You never heard people slapping and doing tapping in metal. You know, it didn't exist before he did that. You know,
Well,
I'm not
it
saying
was
guys, you know, Cliff Burton played with his hands and his fingers and stuff. You know, a lot of guys did, but he was actually, you know, plucking the strings almost to a hip hop beat with a tribal drum track in the background. So, you know, it's pretty interesting going back and listening to it. And it kind of came out of nowhere, you know, that particular Korn specifically, you know. The rest of the bands you can kind of see copying and bringing in influences from there. And Deftones, I would say, next to those two is the other big one. But Deftones was really only nu metal for their first couple albums, and then they found their own style, and they went kind of the what's that dream? It's not dream pop, but what do they call that?
it's almost like screamo almost.
Well, yeah, they brought in like a slow drive influence. What do they call it? There's a name for. Let me Google it.
How about
Raging-
like States Stuck Mojo?
Yeah.
So speaking of Stuck, I just mentioned I was friends with Corey Lowry. He was in Stuck Mojo. That was the first big band that he was in. His brother is actually in Seven Dust. He's a guitar player in Seven Dust. And he talked. I mean, Stuck Mojo was a cool one because they added a southern sludge element to it. That their bass lines and their guitar are very sludgy, but then they've got the guy, the singer, rapping over the top of it. So again,
They're from your neck of the woods.
Yeah, they're from here.
I think aren't we doing something with them?
Yeah, you are. You're
Yes.
doing the album. You're doing the album right after Corey left the band. So him and his brother got signed by another label to do. I can't remember the name of the band that they did, Dark New Day or something like that. Dark New Day. And so he left Stuck Mojo. But he was in he was in Stereo Mud, Stuck Mojo. That was another.
Cyclone Temple.
He was also in Crowbot. You remember Crowbot?
Yes.
He did some stuff with Crowbot just recently, and then now he's a guitar player in Seether. And I mean, there's the money that these guys have. You know, Metallica basically lives off the Black Album. You know, they're still making money, but you know, Jason Newsted said he still makes about $250,000 a year just from the Black Album residuals. And a lot of these bands still are. So I was talking to Corey about it, and he said the guys from Seether have 2 multi-platinum albums from the 90s, and they still make all their money from those 2 albums. You know, I mean, you're talking big money that was in nu metal. It was, but the thing was, all the metalheads were lost coming into '93. You know what I mean?
Yes.
A lot of the 80s bands had disappeared. The labels weren't signing any of, you know, power metal was getting big, death metal was getting big. But that was very underground, you know, the major labels weren't signing them. You know, you had like Carcass, who was making a big name for themselves, and a couple of other death metal bands. But as a whole, you didn't hear any real metal on the radio. And bands like Korn actually changed that. So unfortunately, it brought along some of the other baggage and some of the shitty bands that go with it. But
so we were talking about the 3 of us are significantly older than you, and
Significantly.
old ass man.
well, you're significantly older than everybody.
Than dirt, by the way. But
Yeah.
anyhow.
But I was somehow able to cling on to 80s metal and pretty much completely skip nu metal. But what got you into it? Because you were talking at the first of the show, Steve, before we came on, kind of you were at the ripe age. So take us through a few.
Yeah, I was at the perfect age. I mean, I was just getting out of finishing high school when Korn got big. I was playing in bands, so the music scene was changing at that point. The metal scene was more going the hardcore route, you know, New York hardcore style. Death metal was starting to creep in. It was a weird time when in the clubs there were so many new styles. There were, you know, there were like 30 bands in the main metal scene in Phoenix, and nobody sounded the same. You know, there were guys doing the Sepultura thing. There were guys doing the hardcore stuff. You know, there were all these new elements coming in, and new metal just kind of creeped in right at that time. And like I said, the more progressive bass or drumming, kind of like what you saw with Sepultura, the more tribal drumming was starting to get big. So I think that helped in bringing that along. And then also again, the bass players were really turned on by that, and they were really trying that stuff in the clubs. I don't think if I was in a band, I would have gotten to them as much as I am actually doing shows and trying to learn new styles and new things. I probably wouldn't have gotten into them as much because I was definitely an 80s thrash guy, even at that age. But I was also getting into death metal. Death metal was getting big at that time too, and so was black metal. It was starting to rear up, you know. So I was getting into some of the black metal bands for the same reasons. I wouldn't have looked at black metal if it wasn't for the insane drumming that was coming out of some of those Norwegian bands. Same thing with death metal. What was coming out of bands like Carcass, and I'm trying to think the other big band. Carcass was a main band I was listening to, and Death, obviously. You know, so as a musician, I was really getting into that stuff.
Well, speaking of rearing up, look who we've got here. TJ Lewis from Forebode and many other bands. So what's up, TJ? You wanted to chime in, and so your wish is our command.
No, I like what he was just saying there too, because like new metal, I mean, I'm 33 years old, so I was getting into metal around 2000, probably around 2000, maybe 99. So like the new metal stuff was pretty common at that time. And as a kid, like listening to stuff on the radio, it was unlike anything I'd ever heard. My dad would always play me like the Eagles and the Who and stuff like that, and the Beatles, and still love all that stuff. But like the new metal was definitely the gateway, and especially and I'm sorry, I didn't get your name up there in the top right, but you were talking about black metal. Steve. You're talking about black metal and death metal and stuff, and yeah, that was the gateway for me too. Like checking out bands like Children of Bodom and Dimmu Borgir, man. But yeah, I mean, I was just I wanted to chime in just because I'm really passionate about.
You know, but now that you mention it, TJ, even those bands were kind of mainstream, kind of like new metal, kind of mainstreamed death metal and deathcore and some of those others. I mean, Children of Bodom was actually like they were like the popular new metal band. They weren't like Therion and Bathory or bands like that, but they had some of those same elements. But they were like the popularized version of those more extreme genres, I think.
Yeah, Dimmu Borgir especially. They had the insane production.
Well, and people don't realize now it's hard for if you're younger and grew up with the internet. You know, when these bands were coming out in 92 and 93, the black metal, death metal, and new metal all really hit at the same time for the most part.
Yeah.
And at least in the record stores. You know, I knew of a couple black metal bands in 89 or 90, but you had to know somebody that was in those scenes. It wasn't in the record stores then. And you were stuck by what the radio and the magazine said. You know, you couldn't. It's not like today. You know, you got all the black metal kids that talk about all these bands. How did you not love this band? You know, unless you were in a big city with with some kind of scene, you didn't know that those bands existed. The only reason I got into black metal was the first band that I was in was a band called Siege, and the drummer that replaced me had his own distro. And he would actually order CDs from the black metal labels in Norway. And the only reason he knew about these is because he came from New York City, where there was a burgeoning black metal scene, you know. And he really brought black metal to the Phoenix area. He hooked up with all the record store or the CD stores at the time, and they would buy their black metal through him. But you know, he turned me on to what's the huge gothic metal band?
Typo Negative.
No. Still around today. Filth. Cradle of Filth.
Cradle of Filth.
Yeah.
Well, he turned me on to Cradle of Filth when they were still a death metal band. You know, on their first, was it Principles of Evil Made Flesh? And man, that album blew me away. That and Dark Funeral. I've got the self-release before they were signed to a major label. I've got their first album.
Dark
Nagar,
Throne,
the
Satyricon.
first Bork Nagar album before they turned into a progressive metal band. I mean, these things are, I mean, this was like new stuff to me. I had never heard anything like that, you know. And as a drummer, I really got into that stuff. You know, and I knew of Bathory, and I knew of you know, the other bands from the late 80s, but you know, all this stuff was new. And like I said, as a musician, I was eating all this stuff up. I was trying to learn all this stuff that I was seeing these guys do, you know.
Man, Dissection was the one that hooked me in, I think.
Oh gosh,
And like
Dissection's
I said,
brilliant.
Carcass, as soon as I heard Carcass, you know, that's still one of my favorite bands. You know, and they all changed the way I drum, you know. But and like I said, Korn falls into that group. You know, people, and Korn's a funny one. I've talked about this before because so I saw Korn on their first major, the first major tour they did. It was Megadeth was the headliner, Flotsam and Jetsam, and then it was Korn, and then it was the opener was Fear Factory. Amazing show.
Sick.
That show blew me away.
Was that a Gigantour?
No, this is way before all that.
Way
stuff.
before that.
This was Megadeth. What was the album with a Tula Moan on it?
Megadeth.
Euthanasia.
Yeah,
Euthanasia. That's it.
It was a Euthanasia tour. Megadeth was touring Euthanasia. Fear Factory and Korn were just they each had one song that was on the radio. Nobody knew who they were yet, really. And then Flotsam, it was Phoenix, so Flotsam and Jetsam was the co-headliner, but not really. They did like a 35-minute set, you know. But that was the show, and I have friends that went with me to that show just to see Korn, and now they swear that they've never liked nu metal or Korn. Now, you know, it's just turned into the band and the genre that everybody pretends like they hate and that they never liked. You know?
Yeah, for sure. That's not true, though. I know so many people that are totally lying about that.
Oh yeah, 100%. And also, you know what's funny? There's a new wave of nu metal right now. Bands like Code Orange and stuff that are, I mean, these guys are fantastic bands, better than 90% of the nu metal bands from back in the day that are really starting to show up and make waves. Spirit Box, I've never heard them, but they're doing a lot of big shows and stuff. So
it's kind of one of my guilty pleasures, Spirit Box.
Yeah, it still hasn't disappeared.
The POD's back together again too.
Yeah, they're touring too now.
Matter of fact, they're doing some stuff with Lamb of God and a couple other big bands. I was surprised. I looked up POD. Those guys sold 15 million records.
Yeah.
Dude, POD was so big for me when I was a kid.
Payable on death, right? Is that what it was?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Whenever YouTube came out, when I was like, I mean, YouTube started in 2005. I was about 15 years old, but that's back to the Cradle of Filth stuff. That's where I was able to find all of the music videos and all the old like albums from some of these bands. Like POD had like a hardcore punk record, was their first record. I didn't even know that. Then they kind of went more nu metal, but like seeing some of those uncensored like Cradle of Filth videos on YouTube back in the day.
Well, and they're one of the few bands that pulled it off though, because a lot of bands, the one that comes to mind is Machine Head. Machine Head had a couple killer albums to start out with, killer thrash album. And then all of a sudden they decided to follow the trend and go nu metal. And they put out some of the worst albums I've ever heard. And then they put out the Black Album, or Blackened, kind of redeemed themselves. And then had a couple decent albums. And then their last album that they put out was really shitty nu metal too. And actually, one of the songs is a Korn ripoff. You know, you can sing a Korn song along to it. And then there's another song that's a Slipknot ripoff, where you can sing a Slipknot song to it, you know. And actually, the whole band quit after they did that album. I think they're back together, but still, you know, it's a weird one. And the money was there, so a bunch of bands tried to jump on it. Didn't Bride go that route a little bit?
Bride did one
like a nu metal album too.
Yeah, they did. It was called Fistful of Bees. It was terrible. And I love Bride, especially their first like 5 or 6 albums. But man, that album was horrible. How about Machine Head? That was another one that kind of started off.
Yeah, he was just talking about them. In fact, they're a I think once Phil Demo left, they were doomed. But then Reese Scruggs from Havoc joined them just to sort of hold down the second guitar. But we had an interesting discussion about that when Havoc and Toxic Holocaust were here. But go back to that question about Rage Against the Machine, because
So here's the thing: if
you want to
you're-
talk about your guilty pleasures, I love that band.
I know
I do too.
quite a bit about Rage Against the Machine. So I have a friend I had a friend from Berkeley that was in another band who knew the guys from Rage. He had actually gone to LA and he got us a copy of their first cassette, which would later become their first album. I wish I still had it because it's worth like $400 now. But he got us all copies of it at the show and we were all hooked. So Rage Against the Machine was actually LA hardcore. So if you're
Yeah.
familiar with the LA hardcore scene,
Inside Out.
what's the other big band? It's real. Oh my God, the album is "Do We Speak a Dead Language?" There's another band, but the whole LA hardcore scene sounded like that. It was all hardcore music with the rap style lyrics over the top of it, and there's a lot of great bands that came out of that scene. But LA hardcore had its own sound, just like New York hardcore had its own sound. They had punk elements, New York hardcore was more on the metal side, and LA hardcore was the punk rock with the more rap vocals.
Yeah.
Helmet's another one. Helmet was their own thing. Helmet was that whole Amphetamine Reptile label was just really off the wall punk bands that just added new elements to it. They were more. I would say Helmet was more of like an art metal band, you know.
And I also looked up Disturbed. Those guys sold
Downset,
nearly.
thank you. LA's Downset was real similar, and I think Rage Against the Machine got a lot of their sound from Downset, though they would never admit it.
Have you heard the band before Rage Against the Machine? I can't remember the vocalist's name off the top of my head, but he had a band before that called Inside Out. Yeah, Inside Out was his band before Rage Against the Machine. It's like a hugely inspirational band in
I
punk
feel like
hardcore.
I've heard some of the stuff.
Is that Zach De La Rocca's band or?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and
Yeah.
actually, I just saw something recently with what's the guitar player from Rage Against the Machine?
Tom Morello.
He was in a band with the guy from Tool, Adam Jones from Tool. They were both in a punk band together. A really shitty punk band. There's some video online. They were really bad, and obviously they both went on to be huge, amazing musicians. But yeah, they're in a lot of those bands, there's a lot of incest and stuff, just like every other scene, from band to band.
Hey Scott, what did you say about Disturbed?
I just was surprised that they were sold almost 20 million records.
Yeah.
That's
Like
a
I
lot
said,
of
like-
records.
There's a
huge
handful of bands that did really well, but most, were one and done.
Yeah,
As
No
far
Spiritual
as-
Surrender. That's the one right there.
As
Yep.
far as new metal went and stuff that I kind of got into, I was okay with Disturbed for a minute. Their stuff didn't stick with me. I remember the song 10,000 Fists, and I don't remember what album that was. I think it was one Scott held up. Yeah.
Yep.
I had that one for a minute. If it came through in a collection, I'd probably snatch it and listen to it a little bit. But the thing for me was just none of it landed with me. I have looked through this, and literally the only things that I have in my collection are Chevelle. The internet considers that new metal. I think they're kind of their own thing, but I like that. And then
Alternative rock. Yeah.
I've got these two Stone Sour CDs, and they call that new metal online. I don't
So
know
the
if it
thing
is
with
or not.
a lot of those bands that you're showing, though, are more in the line of Alice in Chains than in the
Yeah.
line of the new metal bands. And a lot of the alternative bands that took from Alice in Chains kind of got lumped into new metal just because of the time frame that they came out, and they're really not. And there's quite a few bands that are like that.
What about this band?
I always thought Seven Dust was kind of unique just because their vocalist was very different. He wasn't rapping, he wasn't screaming. He had this very soulful singing voice which is the reason I liked him so much.
Well, and you
So
saw
what-
that with oh my God, I'm drawing a blank.
No, Eddie just showed me Seven Dust last time I was up in Fort Wayne. We each played a CD for each other to hear, and he played me Seven Dust, and he played me one of the earlier albums, and there was rap on it like a few minutes into it. So I would say it's new metal. I mean, I don't know about the newer stuff. I think he's a phenomenal singer, by the way.
Yeah.
He's a
Incredible
phenomenal singer. I mean, this is the one I was holding up earlier. This is their first album.
Yeah. Yeah.
What about Killswitch Engaged or bands like that?
So
Or
that's exactly who I was thinking of.
all that
Killswitch
remains,
Engage.
Killswitch Engaged.
So
It dies
Killswitch
today.
Engage, though, is
That's
that
butt rock metal.
they're an old school. They're metalcore, what a metalcore originally was. So metalcore
Yeah.
was bands where it was oh my god, I'm drawing it was metal with a hardcore vocalist, like
Like
Jamie
Hatebreed.
Costa and
Hatebreed,
and there were a few of those, and then metalcore turned into the screamo bands. They just kind of stole the moniker and kind of ruined it. Killswitch Engage was one of those original bands, though, that was just really good. And then they had Howard come in, who had that soulful vocal for that one
Well-
record, and it just blew up. And then unfortunately, the band fell apart, and then they brought in back their original vocalist. But yeah, I mean, there's definitely a place for that soulful vocal in metal.
I saw Killswitch Engage played This Is Hardcore Festival a couple of years ago, and I thought that was really cool that fest was like opening it up to bands like that. I think Hatebreed also played, but Hatebreed could be considered a hardcore band in its own right or a punk band in its own right. Or
I loved
metalcore, whatever you wanna call
Hatebreed,
it.
and they were so good live. But they kind of fell into their own trap. They got their sound, and by the third or fourth album, everything sounded exactly the same after that.
Fraser Dawn asked the question about, because I've heard people say this, but what do you think about what about Anthrax doing the rap metal thing? I never considered that
When
new
they
metal,
did
although I
that,
heard people
though,
blame that.
when they did that, that wasn't a thing. You know what I mean? It was an EP, number one. It wasn't their main album. It was an EP. They were
And it was a B-side originally.
Yeah, they were experimenting with the guys from Public Enemy. They were introducing something new. And then, without that, I don't think you have Epic, a year or two later, with what's the vocalist from that did Epic?
Well, Mike Patton, Faith No
Mike
More.
Patton. Yeah.
Speaking of that, has anyone talked about Biohazard?
I saw that pop up on the comments.
Biohazard again. That's a New York hardcore band. They sound like all the other New York hardcore bands. And
Would you call them new metal or rap metal? Like, I think there's a difference.
I wouldn't call them either. Like I said, New York hardcore was its own thing.
That's what I think too.
And all that stuff kind of gets lumped together now, 30 years later. But at the time, New York hardcore was a very different thing when they got big in the late 80s. Yeah.
I've heard a lot of people say that this is new metal. So,
well, and that all started. Funny enough, I happen to have this one right here. That whole scene, really, the New York hardcore sound really started with this band.
Yeah, Crumbsuckers.
When they were doing the crossover in New York, and it started bringing because before that, metal and punk were really separated. Metal and punk guys used to fight each other,
But does that make it new metal if it's just crossover?
No. That's what I'm saying.
I mean, DRI, you could.
This all predates new metal. I mean,
Right.
Crumbsuckers was 96, 90, or 86,
yeah.
87. So they're bringing thrash and punk together, and you slowly start seeing more and more genres, more and more punk and metal. Yeah, punk and metal mixed together. Then you end up with the New York hardcore scene, and then in LA, because of the rap in LA, you start seeing rap creep in, and you got LA hardcore. But it was something totally different once Korn, because if you listen to Korn, it doesn't sound like any of the New York bands. It doesn't sound like any of the LA bands.
So I see people naming Primer 55. Someone mentioned Snot, which I think is kind of cool. They're kind of a cool band, but I don't know. Is Snot like
Snot was kind of
Sublime
cool.
I don't remember Snot. I always thought they were.
I don't either.
I heard them start. I heard the CD with the dog nose on it, start to finish, and I love it. Yeah. I never had heard it, never had given a second thought, and
by 97, I was in Japan at that point. So it's funny. A lot of the really big bands that came in the late 90s, I missed because I was in Japan, and the scene changed for me, But so the big ones.
Saw a lot of cool bands in Japan, though.
Oh yeah. Well, and Japan had their own really cool bands. They had their own new metal scene that was going on, so they had some really cool stuff as well. And they were mixing a lot of thrash in with theirs. So you had bands like Yellow Machine Gun, and I think they did a B-side, or they did a split with Anthrax here in the U.S. But Yellow Machine Gun started off as a punk band, and they started adding some kind of hip hop stuff, and then they kind of started adding thrash into it. But Yellow Machine Gun was this band it was little Japanese schoolgirls. It was all females, and I saw them at a club called Club Milk in Japan. Before it was a club, it was the headquarters of that cult that bombed the Tokyo subway.
Yeah, I was just watching a video about that.
Yeah, they turned that place into a metal club, and there's multiple floors, and there would be different bands playing on each floor. So I went to see another band, and they happened to be playing. My buddy's like, "You got to check this out!" And these little schoolgirls come out, and they're giggling. They got BC Rich Warlocks on, a Warlock bass and a Warlock guitar, and they start just chugging out this crazy thrash metal with kind of a new metal edge to it. And so Metal Lucifer also came out.
That's not new metal. That's straight up.
No, I'm saying that. Yeah, they were
metal.
That was one of the bands that was doing shows and stuff, though.
And
How about Psy?
All right, so there's a van full of all the new metal ever. A van, like a 70s decked out, awesome van, and all the new metal from history, all the bands, the music, the albums, everything is in the van, and it's on the edge of a cliff. Scott, do you push it off and miss the music?
I could care less. I am not a big new metal fan, so
A
few bands I like here and there, but see ya.
I'd push the van. Steve, how about you?
I wouldn't. It was a.
You didn't get your parking brake?
Yeah, I would do it just for Korn alone because I loved the first 4 Korn albums, and there's some other stuff, Orgy's first album, the Deftone album. I still see the Deftones whenever they come to town.
A lot of the new metal stuff it didn't have most of the elements that I like about heavy metal in it.
Yeah.
I mean, they didn't do guitar solos. The rapping instead of the singing. It really was very disconnected from metal. The only thing that really connects it to metal is distortion on the guitars.
Yeah.
We almost made it.
Well, I wouldn't push it off either because the album that got me into heavy screaming vocals, basically what I ended up doing with my life, was this one right here when I was in the 5th grade. So this one, and of course, production value. I got the Reanimation, really cool remixes. And then when my dad saw how much I loved Linkin Park, he got me this on Easter one year. And this is where I stopped. I think at a point with a lot of the new metal stuff, I just kind of stopped listening to it. I ended up, like we were talking about, going more the black metal, death metal route, but I wouldn't push it off a cliff for the old stuff. The old stuff is
I think that I would unload most of the stuff that I really like before I pushed it off.
Linkin Park's a funny one though. So Chester is actually from the same neighborhood I'm from in Phoenix, and he had another band. This is way before Linkin Park, in the early to mid '90s. He was in a band in that scene. I knew his band. I didn't find out till years later that we were from the same neighborhood. I didn't know him, but the Linkin Park. So I was DJing in Japan from '98 to 2004. And I would do metal nights, alt rock nights, and I would do hip hop nights every once in a while. And Linkin Park was the band that I could bridge. I could get, there were a bunch of guys that were hardcore hip hop guys that I got listening to or moving into checking out some metal through Linkin Park. That was kind of a good crossover band that you could get people to listen to that were into other styles and get them into other stuff. So that was a funny one. And Linkin Park was, yeah.
Sorry, I was gonna say, how about this one?
Yeah,
So
I don't remember them.
I'm just curious because when I was looking up new metal before the show, they were one of the bands that was listed, and they were one of the bigger selling bands. So I was kind of surprised to see them listed in there because I didn't really think that they were that.
Here's the problem with bands like that: when I see In This Moment and see the female on the front of it, the first thing I think is operatic metal, which I'm not into. And there's a lot of bands that I found out about later that are not operatic metal, but their album covers have always looked like they were. And
she's not even close to operatic metal.
Yeah.
I think if the only new metal band I ever heard was Coal Chamber, I'd probably push the damn van off the. I fucking hate that band.
Coal Chamber's first album. Yeah, I want to get that actually. The Love and Death.
Yeah, this is one that Rob and I worked on actually.
Yeah, that's Head from Korn.
Yep.
Who else is in that? Isn't there another big name guy in that band?
I don't know. You'd have to tell me. I don't
I
really
think
know.
Carcass's mom is in that band.
Easy.
I saw
big
Head at
fella.
I saw
Double
Head at
Limited
Cornerstone
Instrument,
Festival one year. That
Classic
was cool.
Crane.
Disciple, another one that went the new metal route. Although they were around way before new metal, starting off in the early '90s as kind of the groove metal thing, and then
They're still doing
morphed into the.
festivals and stuff. That's
Oh yeah, they're still out there playing.
they did a great job crossing over. Arch Enemy, I would not call new metal at all.
Mm-mm.
That's Amit's band, right? Arch Enemy.
Yeah.
Oh, that's not even close to new metal.
No, and when they had Johan Leva, they were just straight up Swedish death metal, and
Yeah.
then he got ousted, and they started doing the chick singer thing, and
Yeah, I like their first few, even the first few albums with the girl singer I liked, but that's another band. They just kind of sound the same now. All these out, 10 albums in or whatever.
yeah, they all sound the. I mean, he knows the formula, and he's got Jeff Loomis, so I mean, the band is like an all-star band. I mean, Daniel Erlinson on drums, Charlie D'Angelo on bass, and then Jeff Loomis is your sidekick guitar player.
I didn't know Jeff Loomis. I didn't know Jeff Loomis was in it.
Oh yeah, he's been in the last three records.
Oh, that's why I haven't listened to the last three. I haven't grabbed the
ever since Nevermore broke up. That's pretty much where he's been.
Yeah.
Yep. All right, boys. Let's blow through the comments here at the end. Arch Enemy is
In Flames. What are In Flames anymore? I don't know what they are.
I don't. Yeah, they're early.
Just a Race was such a great record, but
oh man, what's the one with the white album cover with the building on it? That was the last one of theirs. I really Reroute to Remain.
Yeah,
was the last album of theirs that I really liked. I didn't like anything after that. Even that one was kind of a transition record.
They're kind of like Meshuggah for me too. They just I don't get it anymore.
Yeah,
I love their early stuff. Like you said, TJ, I love the earlier Clayman.
The band that got hijacked too, because
he's one of my favorite new metal bands.
Oh man, I love that. That's not new metal. I love that album. If you guys haven't heard that, I know Rob's heard it, but man, that's such a great thrash album.
It's killer thrash metal, but
it
is new
and big.
NEW.
Yeah, kind of like the new Ozric Tentacles that's out next month.
Yeah, absolutely.
They have elements of metal in that.
No,
if you didn't say it, I was gonna.
At any moment.
Look, listen to Edwin's guitar playing, and you know that there is a metal influence there. Ouch.
What about Static X? Static X, they were more industrial metal, maybe, but I felt kind of new metal.
Static X was another one.
I love
their
Static
first
X.
album, Wisconsin Death Trip. I mean, that was just a different sound.
So cool.
Nobody else sounded like that, and I really liked that. I saw them in 2005 at Ozfest.
Start a war tour, probably.
And man, they were fantastic live.
What about Power Man 5000? Aren't they in the same?
Liked them.
Isn't that Rob Zombie's brother?
Either, but
that was Rob Zombie's brother. That's the only reason he got signed. I don't see that band getting signed any other way. I guess there's people out there that love them because they keep reissuing the records, but yeah.
Oh, you know what was a big one for me too was OTEP, but I kind of am ashamed of that now. But I thought they were cool. Like House of Secrets, I thought was a pretty cool record. But
see, once again, you get your politics in front of your music, and you start to alienate people. When you have the platform, you could preach your politics in your music, but I know that.
Well, she didn't start off that way.
She didn't. I know that
off as a straight edge kind of person,
right?
And then as they got more popular, she went the hardcore feminist route and just kind of alienated everybody.
Even the Queen of the Crypt, Stefra, loved OTEP at one time, but for that very same reason, it just alienated even the most liberal of audiences, and it's like. But what I mean. I think new metal actually had sort of more of an emotional message in it, if we could say that, than regular metal per se, and maybe that's why it just was so attractive to people. I don't know.
New metal replaced 80s rock or 80s glam in the way that and what I mean by that is it was a music that the girls got into as well as the guys. 80s glam, the girls loved it as much as the guys did. Death metal, black metal, no girls liked it at the time. There's some now, it's more trendy now to be into black metal and stuff. But back then, no women that I knew of were into it. New metal came around and girls were getting into that. There were, it was a girl friendly sound, I guess. And
maybe because it's more emotional.
Well, yeah, that definitely helped it as well.
Someone said Sugar Ray.
Sugar Ray is a funny
Sugar
one. Their
Ray.
first album, what is it called? Brownies and something, is almost a punk album. It's really good. It was like an underground album that me and a bunch of my friends liked. And then they came out with the next album, which is the one with Fly in it, which is one of the worst albums ever. And, that was another one where I'm pretty sure the record label pressured them into changing. And
well, it's like Incubus, Fungus Among Us. That was a straight up punk record.
Incubus was another one that completely changed their sound. And they're almost a jam band now. They, I went to see, I love Sublime.
Spacey.
I love Sublime, and they do that Sublime tribute now with Rome on vocals, who sounds just like Bradley live. And it's always a fun show. But Incubus was on the set too, and I had to leave by the third song. They were doing these long, meandering, boring, progressive, just instrumental wankery, I couldn't stand it. It drove me nuts. But
y'all remember that band Crazy Town? That song Butterfly?
Oh yeah, another one that the girls loved.
Yeah, man, Primer 55.
I just saw a video of the singer of Crazy Town doing a instrumental version of Butterfly with these guys, and like he looks so bad, man. He's got no more teeth.
Oh yeah,
he looks just totally strung out.
Well, Limp Bizkit's another one. Limp Bizkit's first album was fantastic. It was straight up metal, and then all of a sudden, or straight up new metal, and then their second album, they decided to go full in on the rap. And I mean, they sold millions of records. Don't get me wrong.
They did it all for the nookie, man. Come on.
But
so you could take that cookie.
That's right.
Sound
and stick it up your A. Stick it up your A.
Oh no, that is
I loved Chocolate Starfish when it came out. I thought it was just one of the most ignorant things I'd ever heard. I mean, I was young, and the amount of times he says the F word on that record. I think if he says it 2 more times, that's 46 fucks in this fucked up rhyme, he says.
Yeah, I think so.
All right, boys. Well, that was kind of a new metal episode. we were swerving the bus all over.
Fraser Gamma Bomb is definitely not new metal.
No,
Yeah.
no
Well,
way.
If that's from Fraser, he just starts listing bands.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. Girls' school, no, sir.
Yeah. It just. All right, you boys got any parting shots before we get out of here?
No, man. Hey, thanks for joining us, TJ and Steve. You too. This is killer.
Man.
I couldn't have carried the conversation. In fact, when they texted me the other day and said, "Hey, we want to do an episode on new metal," I just unless you're talking about the new Tomb Mold,
Right.
which I think is it's going to be my metal album of the year, bar none. That thing is fantastic. I can't get it out of my player, and I think even the layman would love it.
Have you checked out Code Orange yet?
No.
Check them out. I think you'll dig them.
Dude.
Okay.
I mean,
it's so good.
Yeah, and they're super aggressive.
I'll check that out too.
It's definitely a new kind of new metal. And
I saw that band. I saw that band in 2011 when they were still called Code Orange Kids in a yoga studio, and they fucked shit up, dude. It was crazy. And then I saw them in 2017, right after they came out with what was the one with the red letters on it? It was after King. But it was right before this new stuff. And that's kind of the last stuff they put out when they were still kind of way more like metalcore, punk, like hardcore. Yeah. The new stuff is like way more industrial influenced. It's every record they keep going further in a different direction, and you never know what to expect. I think Code Orange is amazing, and it's so cool they're signed to Roadrunner. That's like so fitting.
Yeah.
So.
Actually,
I'll definitely check it out.
Sorry, Fraser, I got stuff to do, buddy.
Hey, by the way, last Friday was you talk about a death metal bomb. new Dying Fetus, new Tomb Mold, new Blood Incantation. That's a triple thrash threat of the highest order. And
So is the new Blood Incantation going to be metal?
side it's an EP. Side 1 it's very metal. Side 2 is more of the ambient stuff, but they are coming out with a full blown, like stuff in the past, Star Spawn or whatever.
Dying Fetus, I can't get past their name. I've never been able to.
Dude, they are one of the most brilliant bands live, especially, but they're brutal. I like Dying Fetus, but the Tomb Mold, sorry, takes the cake.
My dad,
Everybody
You gotta
just go
check
home.
it out.
for Christmas Eve last year, my dad got me into a church service for the first time in forever, and there was a guy wearing a Dying Fetus hoodie at the church. I thought it was hilarious. I don't know if anybody else got the joke. I don't think they could have. I don't think they could have read it. So,
I dig it. That's fun.
but hey,
All right,
thanks for having me on, you guys.
Yeah,
and,
before
you know.
before we devolve into wearing Dying Fetus shirts to mass or something, let's go
Hey,
around
can
the
I ask
horn.
TJ
Follow
what-
Scott Waters on Instagram at No Life Till Metal. You can also find him on YouTube by searching Scott Waters. You can find Steve Harmless Rebel on YouTube by searching Harmless Rebel. 2 badass YouTube channels right there. TJ, how can they find you if they want to? This is TJ from Forebode, by the way.
You can find me on Instagram, Peter Steele Fan, or Tommy Lazarus Pinball for my pinball channel. Yeah, check out Forebode. We're not a band anymore, but we still got vinyl for sale. And thanks to you guys. Man, thank you so much.
So badass. You
Thanks
can follow
for,
Focus on Carcass John Art. Follow on Instagram at Carcass John Art, and I'll wear you down with shit that's in my shop for sale if you go to Instagram and find Metal Rob's Records, also on TikTok and Facebook and all that shit. So anyway, I want to thank Steve for coming on with us. Appreciate you, brother. You are an encyclopedic knowledge machine, dude. It's amazing. And TJ, thanks for popping on. It is always good to see you. Please invite yourself on anytime. You are inside the velvet rope, sir. Parting shots?
guys.
Parting
anything
shots.
funny?
We need to have TJ back so he can tell us what he's doing musically. And yes, Frasier, the new Cannibal Corpse, I'm sure is going to be wonderful. I don't know if it's going to be as good as the new Osric Tentacles, but
Hey, I want to give a quick shout out to this band here. I don't know if any of you guys have heard of this. This is a band called Homefront. I believe they're Canadian. I could be wrong, but they're from up north. Another VC guy or a vinyl community guy turned me on to these guys. It's kind of a mix of The Cure and Fugazi. And I mean, this sounds like it should have came out in '84, but if you guys are into that sound, just a fantastic band. They're still a small band doing shows, but they got an EP and an LP out now on their Bandcamp. So check out Homefront. I've been
is it
playing.
like shoegaze type music or
No, I mean think The Cure, but with a punk edge to it. I mean, really cool. If you're into like Sisters of Mercy, The Cure,
Oh, okay.
into that stuff with a little bit of Fugazi, there's a little bit of post punk in there.
Okay, got it noted.
This is really good though. I heard 2 songs and bought everything that they had. So
You know what I'm really into?